So I'm going to talk today about a couple of ways that we are innovating in the use of augmented intelligence for teaching this class. And this is something that we've hinted at a bit over the semester, but I really wanted to give you a more comprehensive view of what's going on. Before we talk about how we're using augmented intelligence in this class, let me first give you a quick overview of generative artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence. And the idea here is to sort of understand what they are trying to do and how they differ. So in November of 2022, which was not that long ago, ChatGPT escaped from the lab. And I'm sure unless you've been frozen in carbonite over the past year or so, you're aware that ChatGPT supports what people commonly refer to as generative AI. And that means it's able to create models or systems that synthesize new and, at least in quotes, original content. We'll see sometimes it's not as original as it might want to be, but you basically get the general idea. Everybody's using it for various things. Some people use it for an improved Google search. That's kind of the first order way of coming to this, where you type stuff in and you get back somewhat digested responses as opposed to just a bunch of links. So it's had a big impact already in a lot of areas. Of course, people are convinced that the world is coming to an end. Let me rephrase that. Some people are convinced that the world is coming to an end. And I'm not one of them, but I think it's something we need to keep in mind, that not everybody is as enthusiastic and evangelistic about this as I am at the moment. What's interesting, of course, is that the barrier to applying these techniques and tools is ridiculously low. You can use open versions and free versions of ChatGPT. You can use open versions and free versions of Bard. You can use open versions and free versions of Claude. And if you're willing to pay about as much as it takes to get a couple of cups of Starbucks coffee a month, you can get access to better things. So if you're willing to spend $20 a month, you can get the GPT Plus version, which gives you all kinds of cool stuff, and we'll talk more about that. By the way, speaking of Starbucks coffee, even Game of Thrones people drink Starbucks coffee. There's a famous scene from Game of Thrones where they left the Starbucks coffee in the middle of one of the Privy Council meetings. However, and you'll also discover this if you work with these tools for any length of time, they are not flawless. They will do all kinds of wacky things if you don't work with them properly. There's an article by Peter Denning where he talks about some of the problems. I agree with him that there can be problems. I think he's one of a number of people who've taken a very limited view of how to use these tools. And typically what happens is people try a couple things, it doesn't work, they give up and say, see, humans are smarter, humans are better, this stuff sucks. Nothing could be further from the truth, and I'll demonstrate that in a second. But we need to adjust our expectations accordingly. And that's what leads to augmented AI as opposed to artificial intelligence, or augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence. When people think about artificial intelligence, they think people being replaced by computing devices and robots and all kinds of other stuff, which is not going to work for the foreseeable future for all kinds of obvious reasons in this context, because these tools are not perfect. However, if we look at them as augmented intelligence, where the goal is to supplement, not supplant the human, then all of a sudden they start to work a heck of a lot better, number one. And number two, when you start learning how to use these tools and which versions of the tools and how to use the tools, wow, a whole new area of creativity and productivity is unleashed. So that's what I want to emphasize right from the start. Don't think of this as replacing yourself. Think of this as augmenting yourself when used properly. Sort of like an exoskeleton for your brain to make you better, smarter, faster. Now, there's a nice study that was done a couple years ago before GPT was unleashed. Actually, ironically, it came out in November of 2021, exactly 1 year before ChatGPT was unleashed. And you can read this study. It talks about the future of software engineering. And one of the things it said was that the current notion of software development, which is what we've been doing up to the last few months, is one where we're going to replace the current model, which is very manual, using some automation, but mostly manual, driven by people, to one where the software pipeline consists of humans and AI as trustworthy collaborators that rapidly evolve systems based on programmer intent or user intent or customer intent or somebody's intent, as opposed to purely programming things. I encourage you to read this study. It's very interesting and useful. Of course, the issue here is trustworthy. We won't cover that in as much detail as we ought to, but that's the key thing for the long term, trustworthy. You can't replace people unless things are trustworthy. So what I'm going to do in the next couple of parts of this discussion is show how I'm applying augmented AI, AI plus, to what we're doing here. I'm also applying it in other courses, but we're going to focus here. And channeling my inner Dr. Strangelove. If you've ever seen the movie Dr. Strangelove, they have the tagline, how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb. It's a weird, dark parody or satire about nuclear weapons. As if that could be something funny, but they made it funny. So I've learned to stop worrying and love the bot, the chat bot. So we're going to talk about that. In particular, the overall goal that I'll try to emphasize in the next parts of this discussion is there's certain things about teaching classes that are really fun and creative. Creating slides, giving lectures, creating code, explaining code. I even like to review your programming assignments. I find that lots of fun. It's interesting to go through and see if I can find how to help people do a better job of understanding how to write concurrent and parallel code. There are other things, however, that are important, that are necessary, but I don't find them as much fun. It's probably because I'm a flawed teacher at some level. But I really don't enjoy creating tests. I really don't enjoy creating quizzes. I don't really enjoy creating knowledge check questions. For some strange reason, I don't really like to do the final grading of the projects. I like to do the review, but I like to let the TAs do the final grading. I don't like to have to remember what the heck I said in my videos to summarize the content when I upload them. Those are all things that are not much fun. And so, but they're important. They need to be done well. So I'm going to talk today about how I'm using various tools to make this stuff fun and this stuff productive. So that's the overview of generative artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence. The world's fastest overview. There's way more things we could say about that, but that's not really the focus of the talk today.